You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Hello and welcome back to THE100, Television, Film, and Theater. I am your instructor, Naomi Buckley, and today we are in session 5, broadcast 5. Today we are going to be looking at A Raisin in the Sun in the latter half of the broadcast today. And I just want to talk a little bit about that in a moment. But before we do, I want to remind you, we are, of course, as always, right now, live and online. So if you want to give us a call at 310-928-7330, or you can type in a question or comment to askdhtvlive@gmail.com. Remember, if you call in or you type in a question or a comment, you're going to get some extra credit. And there was a question this last week about that. Somebody had emailed me. Just remember, if you do that, if you type in, sometimes I get to read them while we're online, but sometimes I don't. But it doesn't matter whether I read it online or not. Your name is recorded and you get the extra credit either way. So even if I don't read it online, even if you don't hear me say your name online while we're in the broadcast, it doesn't mean that you weren't recorded. So a couple people were checking in with me this week because they said, oh, I typed in, but I didn't hear you say my name. And just don't worry, we've got your name. We get a list, I get a list at the end, and we make sure that you get the extra credit. So that, of course, brings me to our question, extra credit question of the day. We're going to actually have two today, so you have two opportunities to respond. But this first one is going to be about Asian drama, simply because we're going to be starting with that in our little theater overview this afternoon. So why have so many Asian forms of theater, like no drama in Japan, remained unchanged over 3 or 4 centuries? So I'm just asking you to maybe speculate as to why you think that is, or if you happen to have any knowledge in this area. Why do you think it is that these Asian forms of theater, like No, have basically remained unchanged, which is pretty dramatic considering that we don't really have anything similar here in Western drama, right? Obviously, people go and do adaptations of Greek pieces or Roman pieces, and sometimes we'll have very special, performances where people try to reproduce what happened on the Greek stage, but that's pretty rare. Even when we see these productions of Greek or Roman theater, they're usually kind of these modern adaptations where we see people in semi-modern dress or our interpretation of what this would look like, and it's not really an accurate look at what these things would have actually been like. Whereas when we look at the Asian forms, we see this very, very accurate depiction of what had been happening basically centuries ago. When you go and watch No drama, it looks very much like it did pretty much a century or two ago when it was originally being performed. So why do you think that is? If you have a question or a comment about that or something you'd like to share with us, I want to encourage you. You just saw the numbers and the email on there. All right, let's do a tiny bit of housekeeping. So I do want to remind you a couple things. I still haven't gotten to grading, I think I might have 2 weeks or 1 week of your discussion boards. I did do the first 2 weeks, so I have 2 weeks to do, not including this Sunday. And I'll get to that probably this weekend, so please don't worry. It's on my list of to-dos. You guys have been pretty much, as far as I can tell, keeping up with your tests and taking your tests at a timely in a timely fashion. I haven't had anyone, fortunately, have any problems. Well, that 1 week we did, but all that I think has been solved now. So please stay up with your tests. Now this week, though, you do not have a test. This week you have a writing assignment, and it is on Raisin in the Sun. Last week I reminded you that this was coming up, right? So hopefully all of you already have your plays. You've already read the play today, by today, hopefully. Because on Sunday, what you're going to be doing is, instead of taking a test, you're going to be turning in your first writing assignment for this class. So the writing assignment is very, very clearly described in the assignments page of this week, and it's also described in the syllabus. In the writing and speaking guidelines. So if you want to go into either of those things and take a really good look, because I'm going to just briefly explain it right now. But if you'd like to have a further explanation, more detailed, or you don't remember exactly, then those are the two places, the assignments page or the writing guidelines, okay? But what you're going to do is you're going to pick one of the characters from the play that you like, hopefully, right, or that you'd like to focus on. And you're going to analyze that character using the text and maybe some of the things we talk about today to take a look at this character and explain who they are and how they function inside of the piece. So maybe you decide to pick Ruth. Ruth is the sister. And so one of the things you might do is to talk about the way that Lorraine Hansberry has Ruth talk, the speech that she uses, the language that she uses. Ruth speaks in a very different way than almost any of the other characters in the play. There's a reason for that, right? We're going to hint at what that reason is. I don't want to give all the answers away just now, but there's a very specific reason why she would speak differently. Why does she use different syntax when she talks, right? Ruth also has a very different life goal than pretty much any of the other people. And it's significant because she's a woman. She wants to become a doctor. That was very, very unusual for the time. It creates a lot of friction inside of the house because of it, because of the cost of her education, and just because there's a feeling of this sort of, how dare she have the temerity to want to do something like that? That's not what women do these days. So you might talk about her character in terms of the actions that we see her taking inside of the play. What does she do, right? And what does that say about her? Does it say that she's determined, stubborn, smart? What are the things that she does, and what do they tell us about her as a character? Another thing you might look at is, what do other people say about her inside of the play? What does Mama say about her? What does her brother say about her? She has a gentleman suitor that comes over. What does he say about her? And does this give us further insight into her and who she is, right? And then also, what function does this character play inside of the scope of the play? Like I said just a moment ago, she's a character that has really, really different goals and ambitions than almost anybody else in the house. Why do you think Lorraine Hansberry had someone like that in the play? What is she trying to say with this character on a bigger scale, almost looking at the kind of the themes? How does Ruth play into the themes of the piece, and what is her function inside of this world that is a raisin in the sun? So I want you to pick a character. It could be any character, Ruth, it could be Mama, it could be any of the other characters that are in there that we see that have dialogue. And then I want you to analyze them. Now, like I said, I'm really just going over this very briefly. There's much more detailed instructions online in the assignments page, as well as where you're going to turn it in and in the writing guidelines. So if you'd like to go back, or you don't remember everything that I said right now, you can feel free to go back and look at all those things. You're going to write about a 2-page paper on this, double-spaced and typed, and then you're going to turn it in, and that link is in the assignments page as a Turnitin document. How am I going to be grading these? Well, a couple of ways. One of the things I always look at is, did you meet the basic requirements of the prompt? So if I'm asking you to write 2 pages or about 500 words, then did you do that, right? Or did you only write a page? Or did you only write a page and a half, right? Did you use did you follow the guidelines? It's double-spaced, it's in the right type, and it's formatted correctly. Did you use good grammar and spelling and punctuation and all of those things? And also, of course, primarily what I'm looking at is, did you address the prompt fully? So the prompt is asking you to take a character and then to analyze that character fully using examples from the text. I'll say that again, using examples from the text, right? So it's really important, again, that you have the play in front of you and that you be able to draw examples from the text, so that you're not just saying, well, Ruth, I think that Ruth comes off as a very stubborn and determined person. Well, that's great. That's your opinion. But now you need to support your opinion with evidence from the text. And the way that you're going to do that is by having the text in front of you and then being able to point to specific sections of the text, moments that happen, and excerpting those through quotation, meaning directly pulling from the text, putting those in quotation marks, and citing them inside of your document. So I know that you're not plagiarizing, right? And then showing, see, in this little moment that she has here with Mama and this exchange, here it is excerpted, we can see her stubbornness. We can see how she's got a very specific point of view and is unwilling to bend in her point of view, right? So you're going to make claims about a character. So you're going to say who you think they are and how you think they function inside of the play, and then you're going to support your claims by providing evidence that's going to come directly from the text. You do not need to cite anything outside of the text, right? So as long as you have the play, that's the only place we need to draw from. And as you're drawing information from the play, the way that you're going to cite that work is just in MLA format. And in fact, because we're all drawing from the same text, I'm not even going to ask you to have a works cited page, even though that's technically what we would need. I just want you to put in parentheses after your quotation. So in parentheses after you've quoted a section of the text, you just need to have Lorraine Hansberry's last name, Hansberry, right? And then a comma, and then the page number that you took that quote from. So again, you do need to quote from the text in providing the support for your claims. And the way you're going to do that is after you have quoted a particular section, in parentheses, you're going to write the word Hansberry, that's the last name of the author, and a comma, and then the page that you took that from, right? And that's all you need to do. Typically, and if we were going to be more formal, I would then also ask you to have a works cited page that had the full documentation of the text, but because we're all using the same exact text, right? And it's all from the same publisher, because you can't really get it anywhere else, then it's all going to be the same. So don't worry about that. All right. If you guys have any questions about this as the broadcast is going, and if you're tuning in live today, please feel free to type in and ask them here, or give us a call, 310-928-7330, or you can text, or not text, I wish you could text. You can type questions at askthhtvlive@gmail.com. And if I do see any of those questions come in during the broadcast, I will make every effort to get to them so that we can answer them live and you feel like you're well prepared for completing this assignment by Sunday. Yes, Sunday at midnight, you need to turn this paper in. All right, so we are going to do a further evaluation and take a look together at A Raisin in the Sun, but that's going to be in the latter part of the broadcast today. Today we're going to start with our Asian theater overview. And we're going to look at the degree of stylization that makes Asian theater forms entirely different from the West. In the West, realism is the dominant style. It is the thing that we expect to see. But and we see that in our films as well, but in Asian drama, it's still highly stylized. And that is the main form, is this very theatrical, very stylized form of theater. So we're going to start by taking a look at no drama. No drama is an ancient form of Japanese theater that has been around since the 14th century. So for, a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years now. And it began as a form of religious dance drama, and it's basically stayed unchanged in this entire time. So like I was saying at the beginning of the episode today, when you go and watch no drama today, if you were going to go here and see no drama, or you're going to go in Japan and watch a no drama, you would be watching it in basically almost identical form that people in the 14th century would have been watching it. Now, you can see this beautiful picture behind me of a no drama. Some of the things that they have in this that we would not have is the screen behind the performers that's lit. That's called a cyc. Right? You see that beautiful blue background that they have. Yeah, well, that's all done with electrical lighting. Obviously, back in the 14th century, they didn't have cycs. They didn't have electrical lighting. They couldn't change the lights with LEDs. The performer here looks like they even have some beautiful front light that was done with an ellipsoidal or maybe some sort of spot. So the space is illuminated differently than it maybe would have been. Well, definitely would have been in the 14th century. But the costume, the style of the piece, the language and scripts that are used, what you see here in terms of the stage, a plain wood stage with just very, very minimal decorations on it, the way that the musicians are dressed in the back, all of those things have basically remained entirely unchanged since no drama was developed by the Japanese. So it's almost like going back in time. when we look at these theatrical forms, these Asian theatrical forms, because they have remained really so unchanged. Now, the no drama involves elaborate costumes with an accompaniment, excuse me, sorry, with an accompaniment of a chorus, and it was originally designed to teach Buddhist principles. It was done in a temple setting. So when you see no drama, here we see another really great picture. Why does it kind of look like it's in a room? That's because this is a temple setting, because these are religious dramas that are intended to teach principles, religious principles. And it's that formalized setting. It's not really so much an audience being entertained as much as a group of acolytes, people trying to learn something, almost like a sermon, right, that they're engaging in. It has highly ritualized movements, chanting instead of plain spoken language, and the stories come primarily from the medieval period of Japan, and it's very meditative in its quality. So we actually have a clip. We're actually going to watch this really wonderful clip. This is a modern performance of no drama. There's a little bit of narration over it, so we're going to not be totally lost. And I want us to pay attention to some of the things I just mentioned, the highly stylized movements, the elaborate costumes and makeup. One of the things that's also very traditional is this is all done by men. There are no women in no drama. So even though there are female characters, they're men who are dressed as women. And we're going to see that here in a moment. So let's take a little look at this clip of Japanese no drama.
The pillars are still there, and one gets the feeling of being outdoors, even in a modern building. There are still the same original features. The complete roof, the bridgeway for entrances and exits, a place for the musicians and for the chorus, and the acting area. On the rear wall is always the traditional painting of a pine tree. And on the side wall, there's usually bamboo. The stage, like the drama, is stylized and formal. But to sense what no is all about, we must see some.
Here is an excerpt from the no play Dojoji. The dancer is really the vengeful spirit of a woman who was deceived into thinking a priest would marry her. Her jealous fury transformed her into a demon who killed that priest and destroyed the temple bell under which he was hiding. Now, many years later, she has returned to destroy the temple's new bell.
To a temple in the mountains. Now, on this evening in spring, I have come. I have seen the blossoms scattered with the evening bell. The blossoms scatter, the blossoms fall. And all the while, at temples everywhere across the land, the sinking moon strikes the bell. And if the watchers sleep when danger threatens, I'll not let my chances pass me by.
Good. So I think by watching that clip, we get a sense of a few things, right? Just first of all, how incredibly different this style of performance is from the things that we're used to seeing, right? And it seems odd to us because of that. So even the music has a very, very stylized, excuse me, way of being performed. You notice that as the man that was singing at the beginning, and as he brought his hand in to tap his instrument, it wasn't just him tapping it. There was like a very, very specific set of movements and way that he moved his body, right? And the entire, all of No is like that. So even when we see the performer in there, there is a set series of movements that are required that, again, are very stylized. What does that mean? Well, they don't seem naturalistic, right? They seem as though they are created for this performance, which, of course, they have been. So very, very stylized form of theater has existed for a long time. Also, like you saw, very meditative in its quality, and to focus us on the big themes of what the story that's trying to be told, the moral that's trying to be taught, rather than let's just be impressed by this immense spectacle that's in front of us. All right, Daniel's actually typed in to answer our question today, so I want to read his response. And our question is, again, why have so many Asian forms of theater like No drama in Japan remained unchanged over 3 or 4 centuries? And Daniel says, I feel like so many Asian forms of theater in Japan have remained unchanged over so much time because that was their traditional way of telling the stories of their ancestry. And if they changed it, then we would not be able to receive the story the same anymore and may possibly receive certain parts of the story incorrectly. Yeah, so I think what you're getting at here is also that that this is part of a tradition, right, that's steeped in ritual and religion. And so just in the same way that we wouldn't go, if you're a Christian person or you believe in Christianity, you wouldn't want people going and messing around with the way the Bible stories are told, right? You don't want these No plays are religious stories. And so we don't want people messing around with them. I think what's interesting about the No drama, again, which has existed for centuries, is that these plays were part of the religious liturgy, right? So as opposed to, let's say, like in thinking of the Christian tradition, you go to a church, and what you see at the church is you have hymns that are sung, maybe, yeah? And then you also have the Mass that is read, or the sermon, right? A Mass is probably a better example because certain Mass sermons were, prescribed. In other words, the priest doesn't get to come up with the Mass that he's going to read today. He has a prescribed, something that's already been written out, and he's going to read that. And he's not going to change that because he doesn't agree with it or he wants to update it, right? But that's a very it's way less theatrical. How about that? It's not non-theatrical. It's just much less theatrical than what we see here, which is where you would have maybe a priest saying some words and teaching a lesson, but part of that might also be watching this performance. And that this performance style has been so ingrained in the religious teachings that it is part of the religious experience, right? And that, again, Daniel, is I think what you're getting at in that it's so steeped in the tradition of religion that if we change it, then we're really taking a chance with maybe miscommunicating what this very important moral is, right? So thank you for typing in. I hope more of you type in during the course of our broadcast today. So the ritual origins of drama in Asia are still there. Clearly revealed in the highly stylized way that the performers present their stories, and many dance dramas are still highly ritualized. So in Bali, there is an exorcism dance or a series of exorcism dances called the Rangda, and these dances are done as part of a religious ceremony in order to expel evil spirits, either from individuals in the community, or also it might just be bad spirits that are hanging around in the community and causing bad things to happen. So, there is always a feeling in these communities that if bad things are happening, people are getting sick a lot, or the crops aren't doing well, or it's too hot, or, bad things are happening, that's usually because there's some kind of negative spirits that are there. And in order to get rid of those negative spirits, we need to perform certain ceremonies to banish these bad spirits from our community so that our community can be healthy again. So we're going to take a little look at one of those trance dances. And again, these would be dances that would be performed in a religious setting as a way to get rid of certain negative spirits that might be causing problems in the community. So let's watch this trance dance from Bali.
She bends back and gives a high, eerie laugh. These are the frightening witches into which the beautiful little girls of the ballet have been transformed. Again, the witch dances alone. And here is the dragon, arrived to confront her. As she represents death, he represents life. And they have a long altercation in ancient ecclesiastical Javanese, while she holds him by his beard and scolds him. These are the dragon's followers, falling to the ground at the glance of the witch. Up again when she turns her back, down again when she looks at them. She trips through their ranks, runs away, and as her back is turned, up they get again. Rush to the attack, but as she turns, her glance forces them back, 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 back. And she stands and laughs at them, laughs, and then turns away, indifferent. This is slow motion. Here come the women, also in a ballet formation. They do not attack the witch. But at a scream given by one of their number, they suddenly go into trance seizures, and with loosened hair, turn the krisses against their breasts, falling forward on the krisses that are held in their tautened arms. This one is struggling as they attempt to disarm her. In the background, you see the men, also in trance seizures. And here in slow motion, you see the women. The fumes of the incense that is being carried among them to calm them blends with their loosened hair.
So you can tell, again, that was the Rangda from Bali, and an older clip of a very traditional dance. But what I think I want to bring out is that it's not just a random dance, right? There's a narrative. There's a story that's being told. So it's very theatrical in that way. It's not just random movements with random people moving around. Even though there's not dialogue, meaning people saying lines, that there is a feeling that there is a story that's being told through the movements and through the interactions of these characters, and there's these different characters dressed up as different things. And ultimately, it is a story about a battle of good and evil, right? The witches and the dragon who's good, and then the acolytes of the dragon, and how they engage in this physical trance dance that's intended to cast out the witch and the evil things, right? And so in telling this story, the community at the end has this experience of the explanation of negative stuff, good conquering evil, right? And that this ritual has actually done that in real life too. We've reenacted this thing of good triumphing over evil, and now that's also what's going to happen in real life, is that we've cast out these negative things. And it's interesting because it's not very much unlike what we experience in even today when we go and watch movies. We like happy endings. Why do we like happy endings? Well, we like happy endings because they imply that good people always win in the end, right? That good things always come to those who do their best and try hard and have a good heart. And that somehow this is reflective of real life, and it makes us feel good, like there's hope. Like, see, I'm a good person, and so therefore good things will happen to me and I'll have a happy ending too, right? Even though that doesn't always happen in real life, we still have that very similar experience by watching these stories and hearing these narratives that have this particular structure. It helps us to make sense of our own realities, and in fact, it actually shapes the way we see our reality. Okay, so let's move on. In Thailand, we have a story called the Tsotsikan, and these are stories that are very, very old, centuries old, like the Ramayana from India. And in Thailand, they are very exaggerated stories that have exaggerated characters in very elaborate costumes with elaborate makeup and headdresses. And very similar stories about, good and evil and gods and demons fighting, and ritualistic in their nature. In Sri Lanka, there's a sickness demon that many dramas are still based on as part of a healing ritual, right? So there's this idea, again, just like I was talking about when we think of sickness inside of the community, like crops not, doing well, or people literally physically getting very ill. Those things are often contextualized inside of these communities and in many older communities as being because of negative spirits of demons, right? And so in order for the community to get better, and also in order for a person to get better, they have to have the demon exorcised from them. They have to have the demon shoot away, right? And so in Sri Lanka, we have this idea of a sickness demon who makes people ill, and we have dramas that are based around, like we just saw the one in Bali, where that's about expelling something from a community. We have dramas that are about expelling the sickness demon from a person and therefore healing that person. Even when these dramas are clearly for entertainment, we still see them today as in these highly ritualized and stylized forms, such as in Peking opera in China or kabuki in Japan. So Peking and kabuki, Peking is in China and kabuki is in Japan. And in Peking, this comes from an older, draws its inspiration from an older, more religious form. But what we see is that it's still highly stylized costumes, highly stylized makeup. And in fact, in Peking drama, much like in the past in Western theater, there are no women allowed, right? So all the female parts are played by men. And in fact, in the 20s and 30s, a lot of Western practitioners, Bertolt Brecht being one of them, became very, very fascinated by Peking opera as well as kabuki. And we had a lot of Western practitioners going back and looking at these forms and being inspired. As a result of that, there was an actor named Mei Ling Fang, who was a Chinese actor, and he was very well known for playing female parts, also known as Dan parts. And he very much influenced Brecht, who would later become, in Western theater, when we were moving towards more realism, to inspire him to actually move away from realism. While everybody else was moving towards realism, Brecht was kind of wanting to do theater that was more theatrical, more stylized, and more about the message rather than these very realistic styles. And he was very much influenced by Peking opera as well as Mei Fang. So Beijing, also known as Peking opera, is a popular Chinese theater that combines music, theater, dance, and acrobatics into a symbolic form of stylized performance. So all Asian forms have maintained a highly stylized approach with exaggerated costumes, masks, and forms of movement. And so behind me, you saw as I was talking, there are some really wonderful images. And you can just see just the the spectacle of it, right? So I know we've talked about spectacle before, and it's in your book, but it is, what is the thing that elevates this performance into something that is theatrical? And those things can be very subtle or they can be very elaborate. And here we see that this is very elaborate, right? The beautifully decorated backdrop, people in costumes that you would never see in your real life, bright colors, doing things that you would never see in your everyday life walking around, right? So it is this element of spectacle that is highly prominent in these styles of theater. They're not intended to be realistic in any way. You go to watch them for the spectacle, and that's what makes them highly entertaining. A Japanese form that drew, again, from a religious form and then became secular is kabuki, right? So we saw No theater, that's a Japanese form, and that's very religious and remains religious. Kabuki is the secular version of that. So kabuki is not about, it drew from that religious, ritualistic style, but then it became something else, right? So this is another example of an Asian form that is pure entertainment. It's not necessarily trying to teach any religious principles, but it still derives its style from ritual. And of course, No was drama for the shogunate, the hierarchy, meaning the aristocracy. It was this elevated, very formal style of theater, but kabuki was for the everyman, was the common people, and they found their form inside of kabuki. And it doesn't have any kind of religious connection or in its storytelling. It obviously draws stylistically from it, but it's not connected in any way in terms of its storytelling or structure. So, and it's absolutely dedicated to spectacle. So as we're seeing some of these here, we see the elaborate costumes, elaborate makeup, elaborate gestures, movement and dance, music and singing. Everything is larger than life and really, really spectacular when we see kabuki. Well, guys, that brings us to the end of us talking about Asian theater today. As we can see, it draws so much from religious and ritualistic elements. We see the highly stylized forms focusing on spectacle and great battles between good and evil, some being, even though some are purely for entertainment, whereas others were more for religious purposes. One of the things that we see across the board is just a focus on spectacle, a focus on highly stylized gestures, movements, costumes, and language throughout, and really no need to be realistic in any way, which is one of the things that really separates it from our Western styles of dramas, which have become almost overly concerned with being hyper-realistic and grounded in reality and having, very realistic sets and costumes and language, whereas Asian drama has really never been concerned with that. And even today, even when we look at the modern things that are coming out of Japan and China, they are still very much holding on to a lot of those stylized and theatrical traditions. Okay, we're going to take just a 5-minute break because we have a lot more to do today. And when we come back, we're going to take a look at Raisin in the Sun. We're going to be looking at the cinematic version as well as talking through some of the elements of a play, hopefully helping you to start thinking about what you might like to write about if you haven't started that, and then looking at some clips from the film version. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. And we will be dealing with Raisin in the Sun in the last part of our broadcast today. I'll see you right back here in 5 minutes.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
had when I was here as a student was that I could do anything.
Sure, keep striving and keep reaching high, but at the same time, also lift up those around you.
I want to get up and work hard to change things for the future, to make things better. How do I make my passion come to life?
How can I share that experience?
How to shape and engage the community.
Get hands-on into making a difference.
My name is McConan.
My name is Johnny.
My name is Amaranta, and I'm a Toro.
Don't waste time with negativity. Instead, surround yourself with people who share the same goals as you. If you believe it, you can do it.
You are watching DHTV from California State University, Dominguez Hills.
Hello and welcome back to the second part of our broadcast today. In this second part, we are going to be talking about A Raisin in the Sun, and we're going to be looking carefully at the cinematic version. I do want to remind you that we are live and online, so you can give us a call at 310-928-7330, or you can type in a question or comment at AskDHTVLive@gmail.com. And now I think I have, 1 second, yes, a second question for this latter half of the broadcast. Is Raisin in the Sun still relevant? Does it still move an audience emotionally? Does it still have power for a contemporary audience? So those are some questions you can think about. If there's anything else you'd like to share with us or your thoughts on A Raisin in the Sun, we love to hear them so that you can get some extra credit. Daniel already typed in today. Maybe there's somebody else who would like to take up and respond to some of those questions. Well, before we get going with looking at the film, there are some things I want us to talk about. You guys are going to be writing a paper this week, if you haven't already started it, analyzing a character from this play. There was a Greek man, lived a long time ago. You've probably heard of him. His name is Aristotle. And Aristotle was a prominent Greek philosopher. And he wrote about a great many things, but one of the things that he wrote about that relates to us is he wrote a book called The Poetics. And The Poetics was the very first, basically, piece of literary criticism and theatrical criticism. It gave people a way to analyze plays and to analyze narrative works, right? And Aristotle laid out some really important things that we can use today as we are looking at Raisin in the Sun, or we're looking at actually even a film, or looking at a television show, because they all still apply. One of the things that he laid out was that there are different elements that are important when we're telling a story, when we're writing a play. And these are the 6 elements of a play that he talked about. And today we're going to look at those 6 elements, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one so that we know what they are, so that when we're looking at Raisin in the Sun today, and as you guys are reading it on your own, that you can have those things in mind as a way to structure and understand the play. So what are those elements? Well, they are plot, character, theme, language, music or sound, and spectacle. So these are the 6 elements that every play has, and they're kind of necessary parts, right? In order for something to be a play and in order for something to be theatrical in nature, we need to have these 6 elements. So we're going to talk about these again in playwriting, but I'd like for us to take a little bit of time to look at these and think about them, because these are some things that you're going to be thinking about, not all of these, but some of them, as you work on your paper that's due on Sunday. So here are some questions that we might ask ourselves to help us analyze a play. What happens in the play? And that goes to Aristotle's first point here, which is plot. Plot is what happens. It is the series of scenes and actions that happen in logical order from beginning to end. Oftentimes when someone asks you what a film is about or what a television episode is about, what you tell them is the plot, right? You say, well, this is a story about this guy, and he does this, and he does that, and then this happens to him, and then this happens, and then they're in a car chase, and then he almost dies, right? And what you're talking about are the plot points. One of the other things that's important about plot in terms of differentiating it from other things inside of the story is that plot is objective. That means that it isn't changed by one's own perspective or experiences. When we watch a story, when we watch a television show, when we watch a film, when we watch a play, most of us can agree about what the plot points were. First this happened, then this, then that, then this, and then this happened at the end, right? There's no question as to what happened and in what order. If there is, it's probably because we're not remembering it correctly, not because of some kind of subjective perception or experience that we're overlaying on top of the plot. So plot is what happens. Another question we might ask is, who are the characters and how to describe each one of them, right? So that's character. Who are these characters? There is always a specific set of characters. They always usually have names, even if we're looking at something very avant-garde or modern, in which characters might just be named man or woman, still a name, right? And those characters have defining qualities about them, something that makes them different from the other characters inside of the play. So as we're thinking about plays, we think about characters and the types of characters and what those characters represent and how they function inside of the play. Another question we might ask is, what is the play about? Theme, right? This goes to the element of theme. So sometimes people get plot and theme confused. So again, thinking about what we just said about plot, plot is what happens, whereas theme is what the story is about. Another way to think of this is, what is the message that the playwright, screenwriter, television writer is trying to communicate? There's something that they're trying to say, and what is it, right? And that's theme. Another big difference between plot and theme is that whereas plot is objective, right, meaning outside of ourselves we can all agree on it, theme is often subjective, meaning that it is influenced by our own personal experiences, thoughts, our personality, our own perceptions. And because of that, there can be many different correct answers for theme. We might look at A Raisin in the Sun, and many of us might agree that this is the story of a man who's willing to sacrifice everything to retain his dignity, right? So it's about the innate human dignity of a human being, and how sometimes when we live in societies that refuse to recognize our dignity, how we end up doing things that are sort of outrageous or out of the norm, right? Spectacular, in order to secure our own sense of personal dignity. But others of you might find different elements of theme, and you might not be incorrect. What I usually like to say about theme is that theme is more like a ballpark, right? The ballpark is big, and there's first base in that ballpark, and second base, and third base, and home plate, and all those things. And my perception of what theme is might be on first base, and yours might be on second, but we're still all inside of the ballpark, and so we're all still correct. Now, there of course are instances in which you might be outside of the ballpark. We could all look at A Raisin in the Sun, and someone might make a claim that this is actually about, a fear of communism invading American ideals. That would be pretty far outside of the ballpark. It's not that people can't make claims like that, but it's that when you make claims that are really outside of what the ballpark is, you have extraordinary burden in terms of finding proof inside of the text to support those claims, right? So if someone was going to make a claim like that, they would need to really drill down back into that text and find really specific examples, and maybe go back to other source material when Lorraine Hansberry was writing this to really provide a bolstered set of facts that support this really kind of out there interpretation. But usually most of us are inside of the ballpark. We might have slightly different ideas about what the theme is, but they all tend to fall within a certain set of what is probably correct. Another question we might ask is, what kind of language is used inside of the play, right? And language can be all different kinds of things. It can be stylized, as we saw in the No Theater, as we see in Shakespeare, stylized language, elevated language, right? It might be a more practical or realistic style of speaking that's represented. We might have different characters who speak in different ways. Some of them in a more educated way, some of them in a less educated way, right? And the playwright might be telling us something about these characters by using different styles of speaking throughout the play. So as we're looking at language, we're looking at what is the overall tone of the language inside of the play. Is it stylized? Is it elevated? Is it poetic? Or is it plain? Is it realistic? Is it pedantic in nature? And then also looking at the individual characters and how are the individual characters differentiated? How does each character's syntax differ from other characters? And then finally, what makes this piece theatrical? And that goes to the element of spectacle. So as we're looking at a piece, we're looking at what are the things that elevate this piece that make it more than real life, right? And that can be very subtle sometimes. It can simply be that we're watching a scenario, as we will in Raisin in the Sun, where the stakes are incredibly high and a lot is on the line for this family, and they experience kind of a lot of trial and tribulation in a very short amount of time, right? This play, if you were to see it from beginning to end, is about 2 hours long. But in those 2 hours, man, we go through all kinds of highs and lows. All kinds of things get thrown at this family. They seem to really be kind of drugged through a multitude of crises. And the fact is that in real life, especially in 2 hours, even though we're condensing time down, most people don't experience that kind of crisis on an everyday basis. Yes, all of us experience crisis and tribulation. We have periods of time where we have a hard time, where maybe we get kicked out of our house and we're trying to find a place to live. It's very stressful, or we lose our job, or we're getting a divorce or whatever. But those time periods are actually relatively small compared to the vast periods of time that we live where really nothing special is happening, right? Sort of everyday stresses are happening, but nothing that spectacular is happening to us. But in the theatrical world, obviously, all of our stories are about these high crises moments that happen, because those are the moments where, obviously, even in our real lives, where we learn the most, or we learn the most about ourselves. They're the ones that stick with us the longest. They're the ones that feel most significant when we look back on our lives and the things that we've experienced. And so the stories that we tell tend to have these very high stakes things. But that is spectacle. That's spectacular, because we don't want to go to the theater and just watch people going about their daily lives and having a very nice day or a very boring day, or not having very much interesting happen to them. In fact, even when we look at things called reality television, those realities are really not realities, right? We have, we know now that, of course, we have producers constantly kind of prodding the story forward and trying to get two people to fight, sometimes telling them lies about each other so that they get at each other's throat, encouraging these people to get into fights with one another or backstab each other. And one of the other things we know is that in any of these series, there's hours and hours and hours of footage that gets condensed down into the 1 hour that you watch, right? And that 1 hour is, of course, first of all, constructed in a way that makes it seem like it's narratively cohesive, even though the entire week may not have been narratively cohesive. And secondly, constructed in a way where we highlight all of the tension and drama that is 9 times out of 10 been artificially created, right? And that's just because the fact of the matter is that most of us can't live in this hyper-elevated, hyper-dramatic state. It's tiring. It's mentally exhausting. No one wants to have drama 24/7, right? We like to watch it on TV. We like to see it on the stage, but we don't want to live it. So spectacle is the thing that draws us in. It doesn't always have to be negative. It can be, like I said, elaborate costumes, elaborate sets, elaborate makeup, singing, dancing, amazing acrobatics, feats of physical prowess on the stage. All of these things can be part of what creates spectacle, special effects, lighting effects, sound effects, right? These are things, but nowadays when we go to the theater, a lot of times spectacle is simply the fact that we are watching an elevated, high crisis situation in a theatrical setting. And yes, it's lights and sound and all those things, and it's different from our real life, but it's much more subtle than something like Peking opera, right? And it's not that we don't like those things. Certainly many Broadway musicals are very, very high spectacle. But we do have a wide variety of what spectacle it is. It isn't just amazing fireworks on the stage. It can be something like somebody delivering a very, very dramatic and well-delivered monologue, right? We're going to see that in A Raisin in the Sun. So what is the action of this piece, right? Well, it's as simple as a family moves out of a small apartment, right? And they're trying to move into a house. Yeah, that's the simple action of the play. But of course, there are other circumstances that make this a very big deal for the family. They're struggling to get a chance at a better life, and they almost lose that chance. The son fails at trying to make a dream happen, but then rises up against the odds facing him. And a family reaches out for the American dream, and for a moment we think they're not going to get it, but in the end, they do. Another kind of thematic element is this idea of a black family trying to live in a white America that at the time was even more racist than our current society, and how difficult that was for people at the time, living in a world in which redlining was fully alive and in operation, right? If any of you don't know what redlining is, it was a unspoken, well, sometimes not unspoken, but a practice of having real estate people, agents, not sell particular homes in particular neighborhoods to anybody other than a specific set of a race, right? So if this was a white neighborhood, then we don't, as a real estate agents, we're not going to show a house that might be for sale to a black family, even if they might be able to afford it. And in fact, if they do want to look at it, we're going to make that process very difficult for them. We're going to make it very clear that they are not welcome here, so that hopefully they don't want to move into this house. And then, vice versa. White families aren't going to be looking at living in neighborhoods populated by primarily African Americans, even though that process was slightly different. But redlining was a real thing. It existed really pretty much throughout all of America. And it is why even today we still have neighborhoods that are highly segregated, right? that are primarily African American or primarily Hispanic or primarily Asian, right? Part of that goes back to this sort of redlining that happened back in the 50s and the 60s. And it created these communities. And that has, if you've ever heard of this, it is a form of institutionalized racism, right? So we're kind of segregating people, not through laws, just through our own behaviors and the reinforcing of those unspoken behaviors in society. And then we're institutionalizing this, because if you think about it, the neighborhood that people live in, that's also where all the property taxes come from. So if you own a house in a particular neighborhood, you're taxed on the value of that home, and that money goes to the government. And if you have a whole community of people that are in lower income brackets on the whole, because you force them out of the more middle class or upper income bracket areas where they might have lived, then the money that is generated from this is lower than would be in another community. Well, how does that play out? Well, that plays out in several ways. It means that now we don't have as much money to fill potholes. Now we don't have as much money to deal with infrastructure. Now we don't have as much money to pay teachers and develop schools, right? So this becomes a really big problem as it kind of mushrooms out. And again, it's part of this kind of institutionalized racism that we see that was started and then has been very, very hard to break out of. Even though redlining doesn't exist anymore, it's illegal. Now we see that we've created this whole system of living and operating in these kind of naturally segregated communities that can be very, very hard to kind of break that cycle of institutionalized racism. Well, let's talk a little bit about character, because this is especially the thing that you guys are going to be focusing on. So I want to talk a little bit about character analysis, and then we'll have some time in a moment to look at a few clips from the film and talk about the play. So there are two ways that we learn about character there are different ways that we learn about character inside of a film or a play, but let's focus on a play since that's what we're going to be looking at. Well, it can be appearance. How is the character described, right? When we look at the stage directions and we look at the character descriptions, how are they described? Or maybe they're not described there, but they're described by people, other characters inside of the play. And that tells us something about the characters and how we're supposed to perceive them. So for instance, Mama in A Raisin in the Sun is described as being a big character, right? Physically big. And that really says something about her, that she has this sort of largesse about her, that she takes up space inside of a room, not in a bad way, right? In a very good way, that her presence is big, right? And there's a very kind of motherly, almost very goddess sort of feeling about her. She's not slim and slight. You couldn't just look past her. She takes up space. And there's something about the character of Mama that physical appearance is also helps to reinforce. The dialogue. This is what the character says, but also how they interact with other characters. So when we look at Benita, how does her language tell us something about her ambitions? Oh, I'm sorry, I mixed up two characters. Benita is the sister, Ruth is the wife. I hope that didn't confuse you too much. Benita's language tells us something about her, right? She speaks in a very, very, very different way from the rest of the characters because she's actually college educated. She's not done with her degree, but she's getting college educated. She's therefore read a lot more. She's been exposed to a whole different set of speaking and different set of language skills that the other characters have not. So when we hear her speak, she speaks in a different way. And that tells us something about who she is and what her ambitions are. What does the character say about themselves? Now, this is not always to be trusted, right? So we have to take this with a grain of salt because sometimes even in our real lives, right, we say things about ourselves that aren't true. We might have a very dim idea of ourselves, might not think we're very smart, but everyone else thinks we're brilliant, right? So I might say like, well, I'm not that smart. But in reality, I might actually be very smart. So when we look at what a character says about him or herself, it's not always that it's true, right? but we're looking at it in terms of what does this say about the character. Maybe they have low self-esteem, or maybe they have really high self-esteem, or maybe they're a narcissist, right? So the way they describe themselves is important to understanding who they are. Of course, what do the other characters say about this person? And this is another thing we have to take with a grain of salt, because if someone doesn't like this character, then they may say really terrible things about them, right? And that may be coming from a place of jealousy or disdain. But it can still tell us something about who the character is and who the person is that's saying it, right? The actions that the characters take. What does this say about them? The things that people do inside of a play says a lot about who they are, just as in real life, the things that you do says a lot about who you are, almost more than what you actually say, right? So it's one thing to just say things, it's another thing to be a person of action, to actually do things. And, you know, as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. What you do is actually can say more about you than what you actually say. Is there caricature? For instance, is there an aspect or one trait of a character that's being over-exaggerated in order to create a character that functions in a specific way inside of the world of the play? So for instance, in The Odd Couple, we have Oscar, who's really, really messy, and then his roommate, who's super clean and tidy. And both of those traits are over-exaggerated in order to increase the tension between the two of them, right? Because it's all about these two very different people learning to live together. And also because sometimes it's more fun, right? It adds to that spectacle. Exaggeration can be something that adds to the spectacle and makes it a little bit larger than life, and therefore sometimes more fun to watch. I know I've talked about The Hangover in this class. I tend to use it as an example a lot, but that's another, especially in comedies, we see characters with really exaggerated character traits. So in The Hangover, we have Zach Galifianakis' character, who is just almost ridiculous in the way that he's presented, right? He's almost more stupid than you could imagine somebody being, right? Why is he so dumb? He's such an idiot, right? But that trait is exaggerated for a couple reasons. First of all, because without him being that stupid, the rest of the action of the piece can't take place, right? Secondly, because it's incredibly funny, right? And third, because it stands in direct contrast to some of the other characters in the piece who are clearly not as dumb as he is, right? And so it functions in all of these different ways to create tension, to create humor, and then to actually drive the action of the piece. So names. We can also get a lot about a character and what a playwright intends for us to understand about a character through the names that they are given. Sometimes we're being told about the kind of archetypal nature of a character through their name. So Ruth, who, I'm sorry I confused you before by saying she's the sister, she's actually the wife of Walter. Ruth is a biblical name, right? Ruth is a name that if you know anything, and more people at the time would have been more familiar with this, less so now, but if you are a person who is done any kind of church or read the Bible at some point, Ruth is a name of a character in the Bible who is very practical, very tough, very strong, right? Was a helper to her older mother-in-law, Naomi, it's my name, right? And was favored by God because she was someone who made a lot of sacrifices and was a very practical, humble woman. And we see that sort of archetype playing out in the character of Ruth inside of the play A Raisin in the Sun, right? Also, we can see something like that in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, where we have someone named Willie Loman. His last name is literally Loman, a low man, right? And it is a story about this man who has been brought low and how that fall from grace has highly impacted him and how he deals with that. So names are very important in terms of what the playwright is trying to communicate to us, and the feeling and the type that we might be dealing with can be communicated through the name. So these are the ways that we gain information about the character. And as you're looking at doing this character analysis, these are some things hopefully that you'll look at and then draw real examples from the text in order to support your conclusions about it. We're going to move forward and jump forward a little bit because we have limited time and I want us to get ahead to looking at some of these clips. So we're going to look at this cinematic version of A Raisin in the Sun. Excuse me one second. This film was directed by Daniel Petrie for television and film. He was a director of television and film from 1948 to 2001, and he did some great television shows like Sybil in 1971. But this film was shot in 1961, 2 years after the stage play rocketed to Broadway, actually won a Tony Award. And the film version features some pretty well-known actors, most well-known probably Sidney Poitier, who is a formidable actor from this time period. He plays Walter Lee Younger. Claudia McNeil, who plays Lena Younger. Ruby Dee, another very well-known actress from the time, plays Ruth Younger. Diana Sands played Beneatha Younger. Ivan Dixon plays I can't remember how to say his name. Asagi, I think is how you say it. John Fielder plays Mark Lindner. Louis Gossett Jr., another well-known actor. George Murchison. He plays George Murchison in the film. Stephen Perry plays Travis Younger, the little boy. And Joel Fulin plays Bobo. We only really see him very briefly. I'm not even sure we'll see him in the clips that we play today. And you should probably know that in the original, we don't ever really see Bobo. Bobo is just a character who's spoken about, but we never see him. So in this version, they actually have a little scene, maybe 2 scenes where we see him, but in the play, that doesn't happen. So remember, we do have a second question for this half of the broadcast, and it is Raisin in the Sun still relevant? Does it move an audience emotionally? Does it have the power still have power for a contemporary audience? And why do you think that is? Yeah? So if you'd like to type in or call in, our number is 310-928-7330, and you can type that question or comment in at thtvlive@gmail.com. All right. Well, we're going to look at a few clips from the film. We're certainly not going to go over the entire movie today or the play. So it really is your responsibility. If you haven't started reading it, please quickly read the play so that you can do your assignment. But let's take a look at the introduction. This is the opening sequence of the film. This is the exposition, right? So the moment where we're learning the who, what, where, and when of the play. And the director uses mostly medium shots to tell you about the characters within their such situation. But I'd also like you to notice the very first shot, which is a close-up. And let's take a moment to think about why we think that might have been the choice of the director. So as we're watching this, what does this expository scene tell us about how the family is living? And what do the camera shots tell us in terms of how the camera is being used to tell this story, to give us information about the space that these characters are living in, how cramped this space is, and how uncomfortable all these people are, as well as the tension that's already here and existent from the very top of the play. So let's take a look at this little clip. This is the first clip. It's the opening sequence of the film A Raisin in the Sun.
Lovely. It's after 7:30. Let me see you do some waking up in there now. All right, you just go ahead and lay there. Next thing you know, Travis will be finished and Mr. Johnson will be in there, and you'll be fussing and cussing around here like a madman and be late. Lovely, Younger. It is time for you to get up.
Ain't he out yet?
What you mean out? He hardly got in there, good Jack.
What you doing all that yelling for if I can't get in there? That check coming today?
They said Saturday. This is just Friday. And I sure hope you ain't gonna get up here first thing this morning talking to me about no money, because I don't want to hear it.
What's the matter with you this morning?
I'm just sleepy. What kind of eggs you want?
Not scrambled. You're just a little old happy woman this morning, ain't you? And what is that boy doing in that bathroom? Oh, look, he's gonna have to start getting up early, you know what I mean?
Oh, no. He'll be getting up 1 second earlier. No such thing.
I can't afford to be late for work on account of him messing around out there.
Ain't his fault he can't get to bed no earlier nights. Because he's got a bunch of crazy good-for-nothing clowns sitting up running their mouths in what's supposed to be his bedroom.
And that's what you're mad about, ain't it? Eh? Things I want to talk to my friends about just couldn't be important in your mind, now could they?
Yeah, such friends as you got.
You look young this morning, baby.
Yeah?
Yeah. But just for a second, stirring them eggs, you look real young again. It's gone now. You look like yourself again.
Man, if you don't shut up and leave me alone.
You know, the first thing a man ought to learn in this life is not to make love to no woman early in the morning. You all are some evil creatures at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Daddy, come on! Grandma's gonna be staying home from work from now on, huh, Mama?
That's right, baby.
Hey, insurance check coming tomorrow, huh?
Would you get your mind off money and eat your breakfast?
This is the morning I'm supposed to bring the 50 cents to school, Mama.
Yeah, well, I ain't got no 50 cents this morning.
Teacher said we have to.
I don't care what the teacher said. I ain't got it.
Oh, Mama.
Hush. Deep.
Could I maybe go carry groceries at the supermarket after school then?
Look, if you through eating, you can get over there and make up your bed.
I'm gone.
Got your milk money?
Yes, ma'am.
Ooh, I wouldn't kiss that woman goodbye this morning. Not for nothing in this world. Not for nothing in this world.
Excuse me. So this wonderful opening sequence in terms of how it's adapted from the original, except for those camera shots, the scene is almost identical to what we would see on the stage. And what is some of the information that we get? Well, we almost immediately meet all of the characters, right? We meet Ruth younger, we meet Travis younger, we meet Walter Lee younger. There's only two more really important characters that if we had kept watching would have come in very shortly, Mama and Benitha. We see that they're living in a very small, cramped apartment, a space that obviously they don't have a lot of money, right? Their son is sleeping on a couch. There's one other bedroom. They have to share a bathroom with the other floor of people that's there. We also get a kind of look into Ruth and Walter's relationship. It's a bit adversarial. There's some problems there in the terms of the way that they relate. And it's a pretty tense morning, even though it feels like it's probably kind of like also an everyday morning, except for one thing. There's a check coming. We get several people who mention it. Walter mentions it, then Travis mentions it. And so something special about a check that's coming. We're not sure what it is yet, but we're certainly going to find out soon. But we also realize that not only are they living in this very small, cramped apartment, but they obviously don't have a lot of money. When the little boy asks for the 50 cents for school, his mom says, that she doesn't have it. So we get a lot of wonderful information and a clear setup as to what some things that might be happening later. Well, we're going to move ahead. We're going to take a little look at one of the other relationships that becomes really important inside of the play, and that's the relationship between Walter and his sister Benitha. So I want us to take a look at the way that the director here sets up this relationship. It's going to be the same morning. just a little bit later after Travis has left. And there's a couple things happening here. We're going to see Ruth ironing while Walter and the sister are talking, and this entire interaction is going to give us a really good foundation and look at how Walter sees Benita and how Benita sees Walter as well. So let's take a look at this second clip, looking at Walter and Benita's relationship in A Raisin in the Sun.
I'm trying to talk to you about me. Now, all you're going to say to me is eat these eggs?
You never said nothing new. I listen to you every day, every morning, every night. You never say nothing new. So you'd rather be Mr. Arnold than be his chauffeur. So I'd rather be living in Buckingham Palace.
And that's just what's wrong with the colored woman in this world today. You don't understand about building your men up, making them feel like they're somebody, like they can do something.
There are colored men who do things.
No thanks to the colored woman.
Being a colored woman, I guess I can't help myself now.
I'm gonna start timing those people.
You should get up earlier.
Really? When would you suggest? Dawn?
You're a horrible-looking child this time of morning.
Good morning, brother.
How's your school coming?
Oh, lovely, lovely. You know, biology's the greatest. I dissected something that looked just like you yesterday.
I was just, wondering whether you made up your mind and everything.
And what did I answer you yesterday morning? And the day before that?
Don't be so nasty, Benny.
And the day before that, and the day before that.
Well, I'm interested in you. Mean anything wrong with that? It ain't every day no girl decides to be a
doctor. Come on out of there, please.
You know that check is coming tomorrow.
That money belongs to Mama. It's for her to decide how she wants to use it. And I don't care if she wants to buy herself a house or a rocket ship or just nail it up and look at it. It's hers, not ours. Hers.
Well, you are such a nice girl. You've got your mother's interest at heart, ain't you? Well, Mama got that money. She can always take a few thousand and help you through school.
I never asked anyone around here to do anything for me.
Now, the line between asking and just accepting is big and wide.
Well, what do you want from me? That I quit school?
I don't want nothing from you but for you to stop acting holy around here. Now, me and Ruth made some sacrifices for you. It's about time you do something for this family.
Well, don't be dragging me in.
You are in it. You go out of here and you work in somebody's kitchen for 2-3 years to put clothes on her back.
Well, that's not fair.
Well, damn it, ain't nobody asking her to get on her knees and say thank you, Ruth, and thank your brother, and thank your mama. Thank you, Travis, for wearing the same pair of shoes for the last 2 semesters.
Well, I do. All right? Thank everybody. And you just forgive me for ever wanting to be anything at all. Forgive me. Forgive me. Forgive me.
Your mama won't hear you.
Who the hell told you you had to be a doctor? You're so interested in messing around with sick people going out of here and be a nurse. Like other women, or get married and shut up.
So you finally got it said, huh? Took you 3 years, but you finally got it said. Walter, you give up and leave me alone. It's Mama's money.
He was my father, too.
Well, so what? He was mine, too, and Travis's grandfather. But the insurance money belongs to Mama.
Wonderful. So we get this great sort of dramatic talking about spectacle, right? This argument that happens in this very, very tight space. Poor Ruth standing there kind of, you know, just having to watch this, although we get the feeling that the two of them probably fight like this a lot, right? And to the heart of the matter in terms of how Walter feels about Benita and what she's doing, and that she's being sort of uppity, wanting to be a female doctor when she could be a nurse or she could just get married, right? Certainly at this period of time, not a big expectation for women to do much beyond that. And then the fact that her ambitions are so high that she wants to not just be a nurse, she wants to be a doctor. And the cost of that has, of course, been a burden on the family. And we see how, you know, Walter has these ideas about who women should be, and that we're beginning to feel, from the beginning to now, this is kind of a second scene here. There's a little bit that was between that and this scene. That he really has a kind of a chip on his shoulder, doesn't he? He feels somehow that he has been sacrificing, and he deserves certain things that he hasn't gotten. and he's kind of lashing out at everybody around him as a result. All right, we're going to watch another clip now. This is between Mama and Benita. This is a really, really pivotal scene in terms of what happens here. And it's a really important moment that shows there's a lot of intergenerational conflict inside of this play. What do we mean by that? We mean conflict between different generations of people. Walter and his wife representing one generation, Benita representing the much younger generation, Mama representing the much older generation. In fact, when you read the play, one of the things you'll see is that Mama and her husband, they were both slaves at some point, right? And then they became free. So in their lifetime, they actually had, when they were obviously much, much younger, they had actually experienced that. And then they worked really hard and they made a life for themselves. And it wasn't, a lot, but it was much more than they had before. And they were hoping to, that their kids will do even better. So we see this four, including Travis, 4 generations of this family living under one house and how their views of the world vary greatly. From Benita, who thinks she can be a doctor and do everything and be anything she wants to be, to Mama, and when we hear her talk about what she wants, different kinds of wants and dreams, and Walter also. So this intergenerational conflict and how it plays out, and also the role of religion and God inside of these families and how that evolved over the generations and what role religion played and in these families, and seeing how that conflicts and creates tension in terms of a younger group of people and how they feel differently maybe from the older group of people. So let's watch this third clip between Mama and Benita. It's a really great, one of my favorite scenes.
Hello, everybody.
Well, did you decide to come home? I thought your last Friday's class was at 3:30.
It is, but I started my guitar lessons today.
Your what kind of lessons?
Guitar.
Oh, Father.
Well, how come you done took it in your head to learn to play the guitar?
I just wanna, that's all.
Lord have mercy. Child, don't you know what to do with yourself? Now, how long is it going to be before you get tired of this now? Like you got tired of that little old play acting group you joined last year. And what was it the year before that?
The horseback riding club, for which she bought that $55 riding outfit. It's been hanging up in the closet ever since.
Baby, why you got to flitzo from one thing to another? You ain't never done nothing with all that camera equipment you brought home.
Mama, I don't flit. I experiment with different forms of expression.
Like riding a horse?
Well, people have to express themselves in one way or another.
But what is it that you want to express?
Me! Oh, well, don't worry. I don't expect you to understand, for God's sakes.
Benny.
Just listen to it. Just listen.
Oh, God.
If you use the Lord's name just one more time...
Mama.
Fresh, just fresh as salt, this girl.
Oh, where are you going?
I got a date. George Murchison again.
Oh, get a little sweet on him, huh?
That's me. This Johnny's sweet on nobody but herself. Express herself.
Oh, all right, George, all right. I mean, I like him enough to go out with him and stuff.
What does "and stuff" mean?
Mind your own business.
Oh, that's not picking on her there, Ruth. What does it mean?
Mama, I just mean that I could never really be serious about George. He's too shallow.
Shallow? What do you mean he's shallow? He's rich.
I know he's rich. He knows he's rich, too. And besides, George's mother wouldn't want me to marry little Georgie. I mean, any more than I'd ever want to marry little George.
Oh, honey, you mustn't dislike folks because they're well off.
Oh, don't worry, Lena. She'll get over some of this. That's just their youth talking now.
What are you talking about? Get over it? Hi, Travis. Listen, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm not even worried about who I'm going to marry yet. If I ever get married.
Yeah? Oh, now, Benny.
Oh, Mama, I probably will. But first I'm going to be a doctor. Now, George, for one, he still thinks that's pretty funny. I couldn't be bothered with that. I'm going to be a doctor. And everybody around here better understand that.
Oh, she's going to be a doctor, honey, God willing.
God hasn't got a thing to do with it.
Benita, that just wasn't necessary.
No, Mama, neither is God. I get sick of hearing about God all the time.
Benita!
Mama, I mean it. Now, I'm just tired of hearing about God all the time. What has he got to do with anything? Does he pay tuition?
You about to get your fresh little jaw slapped?
Just what she needs, all right?
Why? Now, why can't I say what I want to say around here like everybody else?
Because it don't sound nice for a young girl to be talking like that. You wasn't brought up that way. Me and your daddy went to the trouble to get you and brother to church every single Sunday.
Mama, you don't understand. Now, you see, it's all a matter of ideas, and God is just one idea that I don't accept. Now, it's not important. I'm not going to go out and be immoral or commit crimes because I don't believe in God. I don't even think about that. It's just that I get so tired of him getting the credit for all the things the human race achieves through its own stubborn effort. Now, there simply is no God. There's only man. And it's he who makes miracles.
Now you say after me. In my mother's house there is still God. In my mother's house there is still God.
In my mother's house, there's still God.
So a wonderful scene that tells us more about the characters of Ruth and Mama, but also about Benita, and then again, the playing out of this really, really interesting intergenerational conflict. In more than one way, and more than just about religion, right? We see Ruth and Mama both look at Benita as sort of ridiculous, right? She's concerned with all these things. One week she's learning guitar, one week she's learning photography and horseback riding. She seems to be, so non-committal and doesn't take things seriously enough in their opinion. And then why is she doing this? She says, because I want to, what are you trying to express? She says, me, and they both laugh, right? And we see there this sort of, again, this intergenerational difference between Ruth, who's obviously still much younger than Mama, but still from a completely different generation than Benita, and these women who believe that, why do you need to do that? What is the point of that? Is that why would you need to express yourself? You just are who you are. You don't need to explore all of these different things or try all these different things to figure anything out. You're thinking too much about this, or you're spending too much time doing it when you should be focusing on, again, probably the things that they think are more important, which is trying to make yourself into a good wife or develop things that are going to make you into a good mother, right? And so we see that Mama and Ruth really view women from this very traditional set of points and values, whereas Benita is in this younger generation, and she sees herself very much as an individual who is to be developed just for the sheer point of developing, right? It's not just about becoming a mother or becoming a wife, becoming this kind of a traditional female figure. It's about being a full person. And Mama and Ruth have a hard time understanding that. Another point that proves that is when she says, if I even get married. And Ruth and Mama go, if. Again, like, how could you even think of that? That's, of course, what a woman's supposed to do. She's supposed to get married. Like, why would you? Well, you can't even be a woman unless you're, what value do you have if you're not married, right? So again, them coming from these very traditional viewpoints and challenging Benita, also challenging their viewpoints in terms of what it means to be a woman. And not only that, what it means to be a sort of modern human being. She doesn't prescribe to this idea of religion. She doesn't prescribe to those ideas and values. She challenges them. And whether you agree with her point of view or not, again, as we're talking about how do these characters function, Benita's real function in this entire piece is to provide that very modern, very progressive point of view, in contrast to all of these other much more traditional points of view that we see at work, and to simply provide that voice, that challenging voice. Again, whether you agree with it or not, this is the other side of that. This is the other point of view. This is the other way to look at it. And not only does it help to create conflict, a very high moment of conflict, right? Where Benita sort of gets put in her place. In my mother's house, there is still God. And she has to say it. You know, she still lives in her mother's house. She still does, everything she does is mostly paid for by her mother and the people she lives with. She is there at their graciousness, right? And there is a part of her that is probably a little bit arrogant and needs to kind of put herself in check a little bit. And we see that happening as well as we watch this scene. So this challenging voice that Beneatha represents throughout the entire course of the piece. And in a lot of ways, she is kind of the voice of that modern generation and the generational change that was happening in general in terms of the country and what was happening with women inside of the country. And we're right here on the cusp of the women's liberation movement. All right, I think we have time for this very last clip, or one more clip, not the last clip, but this clip here. So we're going to watch clip 4. This is a whole segment about this check that we've heard about earlier and it coming and what we want to do with the check as opposed to what the family wants to do with the check. And this is also a really important scene as well. So we have, I think, just enough time to watch this last clip here, clip number 4 from Raisin in the Sun.
Where'd you go today, girl?
To the doctor.
Now, Ruth, you know better than that. Old Dr. Jones is peculiar in his way, but t'ain't nothing about him to make nobody slip and call him she like you done this morning.
Well, it's just what happened. My tongue slipped.
You went to that woman, didn't you?
What woman you talking about?
That woman up the street that takes money from women for doing things that she ain't got.
Did it come?
What are you doing home at this hour? And can't you give people a Christian greeting before you start asking about money?
Made Willie Harris put everything on paper, Mama. The lawyer just looked it over and everything.
Son, I think you ought to have a talk with your wife. Now go on out and leave you alone if you want.
I can talk to her anytime, Mama.
Son!
Mama, will somebody listen to me today?
I don't allow no yelling in this house, Walter Lee, and you know it. And there ain't gonna be no investing in no liquor stores. And I do not aim to have to speak on it again.
Mama, you haven't even looked at it. You haven't even looked at it. You haven't even looked at it and you don't even have to speak on it again? Well, you tell that to my boy tonight when you put him to sleep on the living room couch. And you tell it to him in the morning when his mother goes out of here to take care of somebody else's kids. And tell it to me when we want some curtains or some drapes and you sneak out of here and go work in somebody's kitchen. All I want is to make a future for this family. All I want is to be able to stand in front of my boy like my father never was able to do to me and tell him that he'll be somebody in this world besides a servant and a chauffeur. Huh? You tell me that, huh?
Where you going?
Out.
Where?
Just out of this house somewhere.
I'll come with you.
I don't want you.
I got something to talk to you about, Walter.
That's too bad.
Walter Lee, sit down.
I'm a grown man, Mama.
Anybody said you wasn't grown, but you are still in my house in my presence. And as long as you are, you'll talk to your wife civil. Now sit down.
Don't let him go on out and drink himself to death. You make me sick to my stomach.
Well, you turn mine too, baby. That was my biggest mistake.
Walter Lee, what is the matter with you?
Me? There's nothing the matter with me.
Yes, there is. There's something that's eating you up like a crazy man. Something more than me not giving you this money. The past few years I've been watching it happen to you. You get all nervous acting and kind of wild in the eyes. I said sit there now.
I don't need your nagging at me today. How's that?
Seems like you always tied up into some kind of knot or something. But if anybody asks you about it, you just yell at them and bust out of the house somewhere and go get drunk. Walter Lee people cannot live with that. Ruth is a nice, patient girl in her way, but you are getting to be too much. Boy, don't you make the mistake of driving that girl away from you.
What did she ever do for me?
She loves you.
Mama, I gotta go out. Now, I gotta go out and be by myself.
Son, I am sorry about your liquor store, but it just wasn't a thing for us to do. Now, that's what I wanted to tell you about. It's dangerous, son.
What's dangerous?
When a man goes outside his house to look for peace.
Well, then, how come there can never be no peace in this house?
You done found it in some other house.
Why do you always have to think there's a woman somewhere when a man... Mama? Mama, I want so many things. I mean, I want so many things that sometimes I think they're gonna drive me crazy. See, I'm 35 years old, and I ain't got nothing. I ain't gonna be nothing, Mama. Just look at me. Look at me.
I'm looking at you. And you're a good-looking boy. You got a job, a fine wife, a son.
A job. Now, I open and close car doors all day. I drive a man around in his limousine, and I say, yes, sir, and no, sir, and should I take the drive, sir? Mama, that ain't no kind of job. That ain't nothing at all. I don't even know if I can make you understand.
Understand what, baby?
Well, sometimes it's like I can see my future just stretched out in front of me, my whole future. A big, blank, empty space full of nothing, just hanging at the edge of my days waiting for me, Mom. But it don't have to be. Mama, sometimes when I'm downtown driving that man around, we pass them cool, quiet-looking restaurants. I look in. I see these white boys. They sit talking about deals worth millions of dollars, Mama, and half the time they don't look no older than me.
Oh, son, how come you talk so much about money?
Because it's life.
Oh, so now money is life. Once upon a time, freedom used to be life, but now it's money.
Mama, it was always money. We just didn't know it.
No. Something's changed. You're something new, boy. In my time, we was worried about not being lynched and getting to the north and how to stay alive and still have a pinch of dignity, too. Now, here come you and Beneatha talking about things we ain't hardly ever thought about, me and your daddy. You ain't satisfied or proud of nothing we done. I mean that you had a home, and that we kept you out of trouble till you was grown, and that you don't have to ride to work on the back of nobody's streetcar. You're my children, but how different we've become.
So, again, we get this wonderful generational conflict that we see at play. Mama, who's like, you know, when we were younger, we were just worried about staying alive and getting north, and here you are worrying about all these other things when you have all the things that we wish we could have had when we were younger. Why can't you be happy with what you have now? And what Walter's trying to communicate is that in spite of having all those things, he still doesn't have the thing that he wants the most, which even the people before wanted, which is a sense of dignity, a sense of pride, a sense that the society that he lives in respects him. And that's what he's really seeking in terms of buying this liquor store business and having something that he feels is his own, right, that he can make good. All right, well, there's some other scenes. There's lots of scenes in between that we did not go over, but I think we have a good overview of the play. It's a wonderful play. Take the time to read it all the way through so that you can do this activity that's due on Sunday, which is where you're going to analyze one of the characters and then support your claims about the character through evidence in the text. Yeah, and if you're unclear about how to do that, or you weren't paying enough attention at the beginning of the episode today, just go ahead and go into the assignments page. There's a full description there, as well as in the writing guidelines. There's a full description of the assignment there as well on how you need to complete it. If anyone has any other questions, you can feel free to email me, and I will get back with you before it's due on Sunday. It is due on Sunday at midnight. There is no test this week. There's just the paper and then your regular discussion board. So I think we got through everything that we intended to get through today, guys. We had a great broadcast today, broadcast 5, and we will be here next week plugging on and looking at what's up next. I think it's acting, not sure exactly, but I'm sure we'll look and we'll find it, and it will be great. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I will see you here next week at the same time.